Hi, my name is Kainson Munonye, and I want to welcome you to this presentation as we are going to continue from where we stopped on project time management. Today we are going to be looking at sequence activities. Previously on the project time management knowledge area, we discussed define activities. And define activities follows from the first process in the time management knowledge area, which is plan schedule management. So what do we have for sequence activities? Remember, in the previous process of define activities, we took the output from the scope management processes, and that is the WBS, and we broke it down. We broke down the work packages into activities. And now we are going to discuss sequence activities. Sequence activities is a process of identifying and documenting relationships among the project activities. The key benefit of this process is that it defines the logical sequence of work to obtain the greatest efficiency given all project constraints. You see, every activity and milestone except the first and the last should be connected to at least one predecessor with a finish to start or start to start logical relationship, and at least one successor with a finish to start or finish to finish logical relationship. What is logical relationships? Logical relationship should be designed to create a realistic project schedule. Logical relationship has to do with the connection between successive activities. It may be necessary to use lead or lag time between activities to support a realistic and achievable project schedule. Sequencing can be performed by using project management software or by using manual or automated techniques. Let's now take a look at the ITTOs of the sequence activities process. For the input, we have the schedule management plan. Now remember, the schedule management plan is the output of the plan schedule management process. Project scope statement, activity list, activity attributes, and milestone list. Remember these three items, they are outputs of defined activities. Enterprise environmental factors, organizational process assets. We have three tools and techniques for sequence activities, and one of them is precedence diagramming method. The second is dependency determination. And then we have leads and lags. The outputs of sequence activities are schedule network diagram and project document updates. Let's now take a closer look at these ITTOs, and it will become clear to us why we have these items. The inputs are again schedule management plan, and we used to ask ourselves a question: why do we need schedule management plan for sequencing activities? Because the schedule management plan identifies the scheduling method and tools to be used for the project, which will guide how the activities may be sequenced. Activity list. The activity list contains all scheduled activities required on the project, which are to be sequenced. Dependencies and other constraints for these activities can influence the sequencing of the activities. Activity attributes may describe a necessary sequence or of events or define predecessor or successor relationships. Milestone list. The milestone list may have scheduled dates for specific milestones which may influence the way activities may be sequenced. Then we have the project scope statement. The project scope statement contains the product scope description, which includes product characteristics that may affect activity sequencing, such as the physical layout of a plant to be constructed or subsystem interfaces on a software project. Other information from the project scope statement, including project deliverables, project constraints, and project assumptions, may also affect sequencing activities. While these effects are not often apparent in the activity list, the product scope description is generally reviewed to ensure accuracy. Now we have the other two big inputs, the enterprise environmental factors, normally called EEFs, and also organizational process assets. Some enterprise environmental factors that may affect sequencing activities are governmental or industry standards, project management information system, scheduling tool, company work authorization systems, etc. Alright, let's now look at the various tools and techniques used for sequencing activities. We have precedence diagramming method. We also have dependency determination. We have leads and lags. Let's zoom into these items to get a clearer understanding of these items according to the pinball guide. First, we have precedence diagramming method. Precedence diagramming method, PDM, is a technique used for constructing a schedule model in which activities are represented by nodes and are graphically linked by one or more logical relationships to show the sequence in which the activities are to be performed. Activity on nodes is one of the methods of representing precedence diagram. This is a method used by most project management software packages. Take note that PDM precedence diagramming method uses activity on node. We have a number of relationships between activities, and there are basically four of them. We have finish to start. There is a logical relationship in which a successor activity cannot start until a predecessor activity has finished. For example, the award ceremony cannot start until the race has finished. Finish to start is the most common logical relationship used in sequencing activities or in the precedence diagramming method. Finish to finish is a logical relationship in which successor activity cannot finish until a predecessor activity has finished. Example is, writing a document is required to finish before editing the document can finish. Start to start. A successor activity cannot start until a predecessor activity has started. For instance, level concrete cannot begin until pour foundation begins. And then we have start to finish. A logical relationship in which successor activity cannot finish until a predecessor activity has started. The first security guard shift cannot finish until the second security guard shift has started. Alright, in PDM, the finish to start is the most commonly used type of precedence relationship. Let's progress to see an example of how PDM works. Now look at activity A and B. The first one shows finish to start, an arrow pointing from activity A, this, to activity B. Okay, and then we have the second one, starts to start. It means that activity A must be started before activity B can start. So we have this arrow pointing from the start of activity A to the start of activity B. Then we have finish to finish, from the end of activity A to the end of activity B, and of course we have the start to finish. So spend some time here to get your head around this concept of precedence diagramming method. The next tool and technique used in sequence activity is dependency determination. What are dependencies? These may be characterized by the following attributes. It may be mandatory or discretionary. But before we go ahead, take note that dependencies has to do with the effects an activity have on another activity. Just like the name, one activity depending in some way on a different activity. So dependencies can be mandatory or discretionary. It can be internal or external as described below. Dependency has 4 attributes, but 2 can be as applicable at the same time in the following ways: mandatory external dependency, mandatory internal dependencies, discretionary external dependencies, or discretionary internal dependencies. Let's now take a look at these various dependency attributes. Mandatory dependencies. Mandatory dependencies are those that are legally or contractually required or inherent in the nature of work. Let's take, for example, the painting of the house has to be done after the plastering of the house. That is mandatory. You can't change it, and it is inherent in the nature of the work. Can we think of another one? Yes, we can think of something like the foundation has to be laid before the walls has to be erected. Mandatory. You can't change it. You can't erect the walls first before the foundation. It's mandatory, meaning that it must have to be that way. It's also called hard logic. The next one is discretionary dependency. Discretionary dependencies are sometimes referred to as preferred logic, preferential logic, or soft logic. They are established based on knowledge of best practices within a particular application area or some unusual aspect of the project where a specific sequence is desired, even though there may be other acceptable sequences. Discretionary dependency should be fully documented, since they can create arbitrary floats values and can limit later scheduling options. When fast-tracking techniques are employed, these discretionary dependencies should be reviewed and considered for modification or removal. External dependencies. External dependencies involve a relationship between project activities and non-project activities. For instance, before we erect the communication masts and connect the communication cables and plan the network, the microwave network, we must obtain a license from the regulatory body of the government. That is external dependencies. So the work depends on an external body, the government regulatory agency. I would like to mention from the PMBOK guide that these dependencies are usually outside of the project team control. Alright, let's now look at the last one. Internal dependencies involve precedence relationship between project activities and are generally inside the project team's control. This is completely opposite of the external dependencies that is out of the project team's control. Internal is within the project team's control. The project management team determines which dependencies are internal during the process of sequencing activities. So take note that you need to get it clear. List 4 dependencies, either for writing your exams or for your personal development. Let's now look at the next tool and technique used in sequencing activities, and that is leads and lags. Discretionary dependencies are sometimes referred to as, we've mentioned this. Leads and lag. A lead is the amount of time whereby a successor activity can be advanced with respect to a predecessor activity. Lead is often represented as negative value for lag in scheduling software. For example, a project to construct a new office building, the landscaping could be scheduled to start 2 weeks prior to the scheduled punch list completion. Alright, what of lag? A lag is the amount of time whereby a successor activity will be delayed with respect to a predecessor activity. For instance, if the wall is plastered, there will be a little time for it to dry up before painting can commence. That is a lag, the amount of time you have to wait before you start the next activity. Let's now take a look at the outputs of sequencing activities. Sequencing activities produces just two outputs, and that is the project schedule network diagram and also the project document update. A project schedule network diagram is a graphical representation of the logical relationship, also referred to as dependencies, among project schedule activities. The figure you see illustrates a project schedule network diagram. A project schedule network diagram is produced manually or by using project management software. It can include full project details or have one or more summary activities. Alright. For instance, what you have here is a project schedule network diagram produced with all the activities A, B, C, D up to L. And they are presented in such a way that the sequence of activities is very clear. Take for instance, we have activity A and B. What kind of dependency do we have for activity A and B? Or what kind of logical relationship do we have? We have finish to start. Activity A has to finish before activity B can start. Between activity B and C, we have start to start. It means activity B has to start before activity C can start, and so on and so forth. So this is the much we can take for sequencing activity. Just a recap of the ITTOs of sequence activities. We have the input to be schedule management plan, project scope statement, activity list, activity attributes, and milestone list, the EEFs and the OPAs. Three tools and techniques: precedence diagramming method, PDM, also known as activity on node, and dependency determination. Then we have leads and lags. The output is schedule network diagram and project document updates. So this is where we wrap it up, and I would like you to join me in my next presentation as I'll be discussing estimate activity resources. I hope you've learned much from this video, and I would like to thank you for viewing.